You wake in silk sheets that feel like chains. The room is spinning. Your body aches in places you didn't know could hurt. And there's blood, so much blood staining the ivory fabric beneath you. Your hands are trembling as you pull the covers to your chest, and you can still smell him on your skin. That mixture of tobacco, rosewater, and something else. Something that makes your stomach turn. Through the latticed window, the morning call to prayer echoes across Istanbul, and you realize with crushing clarity that this nightmare is not a dream. This is your life now. You are 13 years old. Your name is Fatma Sultan, daughter of the most powerful man in the world, and last night you were raped by your own husband. A man 47 years older than you. A man your father chose. A man you begged not to marry. Before diving into this forgotten story of survival and suffering, if you enjoy learning about the hidden truths of history, consider hitting that like button and subscribing for more content like this. And please comment below to let me know where you're listening from. I find it incredible that we're exploring these ancient stories together from different parts of the world, connected across time and space by our shared curiosity about the past. The year was 1562 AD. Constantinople, the jewel of the Ottoman Empire, glittered under Suleiman the Magnificent's rule. The city's minarets pierced the sky like spears, its bazaars overflowed with silks from Persia and spices from India, and its palaces housed secrets that would make even the coldest heart weep. In one of these palaces, inside a chamber decorated with tiles from Iznik and carpets from Bursa, a 13-year-old girl named Fatma sat before a mirror while servants braided her hair with gold threads and pearls. Her reflection showed a child's face, round cheeks still holding onto the softness of childhood, dark eyes wide with a fear she wasn't allowed to express. In just a few hours, she would be married. Not to a prince her own age, not to a young warrior she might learn to love. No, she would be given to Semiz Ali Pasha, the Grand Vizier of the Ottoman Empire, her father's right hand, and a man who had lived 60 years on this earth. Fatma had been born in 1549, the daughter of Sultan Suleiman I and Hurrem Sultan, the woman who had changed the course of Ottoman history by rising from a slave concubine to become the Sultan's legal wife. Fatma grew up in the harem of Topkapi Palace, a world of women, eunuchs, and whispered intrigues. She learned to read and write in 3 languages, studied poetry and music, and mastered the intricate art of court etiquette. She was Sultana, a princess, and in her child's mind, she imagined that meant she would have some control over her fate. She was wrong. In the Ottoman Empire, even princesses were commodities, tools to cement political alliances and reward loyal servants of the state. And no servant had been more loyal than Semiz Ali Pasha. The man who would become Fatma's husband was born somewhere between 1500 and 1505, which means he was old enough to be her grandfather, possibly even her great-grandfather. His nickname Semiz meant fat in Turkish, a testament to his considerable girth and love of luxury. He had served Suleiman faithfully for decades, rising through the ranks from simple administrator to the highest position in the empire, second only to the Sultan himself. In 1561, when Suleiman decided to reward his Grand Vizier's loyalty, he made him an offer that couldn't be refused, the hand of his daughter, Fatma Sultan, in marriage. For Semiz Ali Pasha, this was the ultimate honor, the validation of a lifetime of service. For Fatma, it was a death sentence to her childhood. When Fatma first learned of the arrangement, she was 12 years old. The news was delivered by her mother, Hurrem Sultan, in the same casual tone one might use to discuss the weather. "You will marry the Grand Vizier," Hurrem said, adjusting the jewels on her daughter's headpiece. "It is a great honor. Your father has chosen well." Fatma's response was immediate and desperate. "Mother, no. Please, I beg you. He is so old. I don't want to marry him." The slap came fast, stinging Fatma's cheek and bringing tears to her eyes. "You dare question your father's decision? You ungrateful child. Do you know how many women would kill for such an honor?" But Fatma wasn't concerned with honor. She was concerned with the stories she'd heard from the older women in the harem, whispered tales of what happened on wedding nights, of pain and blood, and things she didn't fully understand but knew she feared. She tried again, this time going directly to her father. Suleiman the Magnificent, the Sultan who had expanded the empire to its greatest extent, who had rebuilt Istanbul into a city of wonders, who commanded armies that made Europe tremble. Surely he would listen to his daughter's tears. Fatma found him in his private chambers, reviewing documents with his advisors. She waited until they had left, then fell to her knees before him. "Father, please. I beg you. Don't make me marry the Grand Vizier. He is too old. I am too young. Please, I'll do anything else you ask of me." Suleiman looked at his daughter with the same cold calculation he used when planning military campaigns. There was no warmth in his eyes, no softening of his expression. "You are my daughter, and you will do your duty. This marriage strengthens my position and rewards loyal service. Your feelings are irrelevant. The matter is settled." The preparations for the wedding consumed the palace for months. Seamstresses created elaborate gowns encrusted with emeralds and rubies. Cooks prepared feasts that would feed thousands. Musicians practiced songs of celebration. And through it all, Fatma moved like a ghost, her spirit already beginning to die. She stopped eating, her already slender frame becoming skeletal. The older women in the harem noticed but said nothing. They had all been through their own versions of this nightmare. Some tried to prepare her, to explain what would happen on her wedding night, but their attempts at comfort only increased her terror. "It will hurt at first," one aunt told her, "but you'll get used to it." "Just close your eyes and think of something else," advised a cousin who had been married at 14. "Men finish quickly. It will be over before you know it." But the worst advice came from her own mother, Sultan, who had once been a slave girl herself before captivating Suleiman's heart. "Use your body to gain power," she told Fatma. "I was nothing, and I became everything by learning how to please your father. You can do the same with your husband." Fatma wanted to scream that she didn't want power. She wanted to be a child. She wanted to play with her younger siblings. She wanted to read poetry in the palace gardens. She wanted anything except what awaited her. As the wedding day approached, Fatma made one final desperate attempt to escape her fate. Late one night, she bribed a eunuch guard with jewels stolen from her chambers and tried to flee the palace. She got as far as the third courtyard before she was caught. The punishment was swift and brutal. Suleiman, furious at her defiance, had her locked in her chambers for 2 weeks with only bread and water. She was told that if she tried to escape again, the eunuch who had helped her would be executed, and it would be her fault. The message was clear. Resistance would only cause more suffering. Fatma surrendered. On the morning of her wedding day in 1562, servants came to her chambers before dawn. They bathed her in water scented with rose petals and jasmine. They dressed her in layers of silk and brocade so heavy she could barely move. They painted her face with cosmetics that made her look older, more sophisticated, less like the terrified child she was. When they placed the jeweled headpiece on her head, its weight pressed down like a crown of thorns. The wedding ceremony itself was a blur. Fatma moved through it mechanically, speaking the words she was told to speak, signing the documents she was told to sign, accepting the congratulations of guests who praised her beauty and her father's generosity. She caught glimpses of her husband throughout the day, Semiz Ali Pasha in his elaborate robes, his belly straining against the fabric, his beard streaked with gray, his eyes watching her with an expression that made her skin crawl. She saw lust there, yes, but also something else, possession, the look of a man who had been given a valuable object and was already planning how to use it. The feast lasted for hours. Fatma sat at the center of it all, unable to eat, unable to speak, watching the sun sink lower in the sky, and knowing that when darkness fell, she would be taken to her husband's chambers. When the moment finally came, a group of older women, led by her mother, escorted her through the palace corridors. Their faces were sympathetic but resigned. They knew what awaited her, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. They brought her to a suite of rooms she had never seen before, chambers that had been specially prepared for the wedding night. Candles filled the space with flickering light. Incense burned in golden censers. The bed, massive and draped in red silk, dominated the room like an altar of sacrifice. The women undressed her slowly, removing layer after layer of clothing until she stood naked and shivering despite the warm night air. They gave her a thin nightgown, translucent enough to reveal everything beneath it, and placed her on the bed. "Remember what I told you," her mother whispered. "Make him happy, and you'll have everything you want." Then they left, and Fatma was alone. She waited in that room for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Every sound made her jump. Every shadow seemed to move. Her heart was beating so fast she thought it might burst through her chest. Her hands were clenched in the sheets, twisting the fabric until her knuckles turned white. When the door finally opened, Samiz Ali Pasha entered alone. He had removed his formal robes and wore only a loose kaftan that did nothing to hide his considerable bulk. He was breathing heavily, whether from exertion or excitement, Fatma couldn't tell. He stood there for a moment, looking at her, and Fatma saw his eyes travel slowly over her body, taking in every detail of the child bride he had been given. "You are even more beautiful than I imagined," he said, his voice thick. "Your father has blessed me beyond measure." He walked toward the bed, and Fatma instinctively pulled back, pressing herself against the headboard. The movement seemed to amuse him. "There's no need to be afraid, my little dove. I'll be gentle. At first." What happened next would haunt Fatma for the rest of her life. The details are too graphic, too painful to recount in full, but the Ottoman court records and later testimonies from palace servants paint a picture of violence that would be considered criminal by any modern standard. Samiz Ali Pasha did not keep his promise to be gentle. He approached the marriage bed with the same aggressive entitlement he brought to political negotiations. For him, Fatma was not a person, but a prize, a reward for his loyalty, a body to be used however he desired. When she cried out in pain, he covered her mouth with his hand. When she tried to push him away, he pinned her wrists above her head. When she begged him to stop, he laughed and told her she would learn to enjoy it. The assault lasted for hours. Multiple times that night, he took what he wanted from her broken body, each time becoming more violent, more demanding. He seemed to take pleasure in her pain, in her tears, in her obvious terror. Between assaults, he would talk to her, telling her how lucky she was to be his wife, how other women would envy her position, how she should be grateful for his attention. By the time dawn broke over Istanbul, Fatma had retreated somewhere deep inside herself, a psychological escape from a physical reality too terrible to endure. Her body remained on that blood-stained bed, but her mind had fled to some distant place where pain couldn't reach her. When the servants came in the morning, as tradition required, to check the bedsheets for proof of virginity, they found more blood than they had ever seen. One of the older women, who had attended hundreds of such mornings, later told another servant that she had never witnessed such violence, such clear evidence of brutality. The sheets were displayed as custom demanded, and the assembled crowd of nobles and officials offered their congratulations to Samiz Ali Pasha on successfully consummating his marriage. No one asked why the bride wasn't present. No one questioned why so much blood had been shed. No one cared about the 13-year-old girl who lay in that chamber, her body broken, her spirit shattered. The weeks that followed were perhaps even worse than that first night. Fatma was now the wife of the Grand Vizier, and she was expected to fulfill her duties as such. This meant submitting to her husband's demands whenever he desired, which was frequently. Samiz Ali Pasha, having been given license to possess this young girl, took full advantage of his rights as husband. He would summon her to his chambers multiple times a day, sometimes for sex, sometimes simply to assert his dominance by having her sit naked at his feet while he conducted business. He seemed to enjoy her humiliation, her obvious distress, her inability to hide her revulsion. Fatma tried to numb herself, to follow her mother's advice and simply endure. But unlike her mother, who had learned to weaponize her sexuality to gain power, Fatma couldn't separate her physical body from her emotional self. Every touch felt like a violation. Every encounter left her feeling more dead inside. She stopped speaking unless directly addressed. She stopped eating unless forced. She spent hours staring at walls, her mind blank, her body present, but her soul fled. The other women in the harem noticed the change. The vibrant child who had laughed and played just months before had been replaced by a hollow shell, a ghost wearing Fatma Sultan's face. Several times, Fatma attempted suicide. Once, she tried to drown herself in the palace hammam. holding herself underwater until servants pulled her out. Another time, she was found with a knife from the kitchens, having made shallow cuts on her wrists before losing courage. Each time, the incidents were covered up, hushed, explained away as accidents or emotional outbursts. The truth that the Sultan's daughter was being destroyed by the marriage he had arranged could not be acknowledged. To do so would be to admit that Suleiman the Magnificent had made a terrible mistake, and sultans did not make mistakes. Fatma's suffering was reframed as her own failing, her inability to adjust to married life, her weakness of character. Meanwhile, Semiz Ali Pasha continued his life unchanged. In public, he was the respected Grand Vizier, the Sultan's right hand, a man of wisdom and power. In private, he was a predator who had been given legal access to his prey. He showed no awareness of the damage he was causing, or perhaps he simply didn't care. In the Ottoman court, wives were property, and a man could do whatever he wanted with his property. Several courtiers later recorded in their memoirs that they had witnessed disturbing changes in Fatma Sultan. One noted that she had developed a nervous habit of constantly washing her hands, scrubbing them raw even when they were clean. Another mentioned that she would sometimes break into uncontrollable sobbing during court functions, forcing her to be escorted away. A third observed that she had lost so much weight that her bones were visible beneath her skin, making her look more like a corpse than a living princess. But perhaps the most telling detail comes from a letter written by Fatma herself, discovered years later, hidden in the palace archives. In it, she wrote to her younger sister, warning her of what marriage might bring. "Dearest sister," the letter read, "if father ever speaks to you of marriage, I beg you to do what I could not. Find the courage to die before you say the vows. Death is kinder than what awaits you in the marriage bed. I know this now. I wish I had known it then. Your loving sister, who is already dead though her body still draws breath." The letter was never sent. It was found among Fatma's possessions after her death, a testament to her suffering that she couldn't bring herself to inflict on her sister by revealing the truth. The marriage lasted 6 years. 6 years of systematic rape and psychological torture, all sanctioned by law, by religion, by tradition. 6 years of Fatma's slow disintegration as a person. And then in 1568, something happened that would change everything. Semiz Ali Pasha died. The official cause was recorded as natural causes, a heart attack likely brought on by his obesity and advanced age. He was 63 or 68 years old, depending on which records you believe. His death came suddenly during a meeting with provincial governors. He clutched his chest, gasped for air, and collapsed. He was dead before physicians could be summoned. When news of his death reached Fatma, her reaction shocked the palace. She laughed. It wasn't a laugh of joy or relief. It was something else, something broken and terrible, a sound that made the servants who heard it step back in fear. Fatma laughed until she couldn't breathe, until tears streamed down her face, until her voice gave out and she collapsed to the floor. And then she did something even more shocking. She ordered that his body not be given the elaborate funeral befitting a grand vizier. Instead, she wanted him buried quickly, without ceremony, with minimal respect. "Let the worms have him," she reportedly said. "Let him rot as he made me rot." Her family was horrified. Suleiman himself intervened, overruling his daughter's wishes and arranging a state funeral for his former grand vizier. Fatma refused to attend. When her father demanded her presence, she told him something that palace records hint at but never fully reveal. Whatever she said, it was enough to make Suleiman turn pale and leave her chambers without another word. Some historians speculate that Fatma finally told her father what her marriage had been, the details of the abuse, the violence, the suffering. If so, it came too late to matter. After Semiz Ali Pasha's death, Fatma was a widow at age 19. In Ottoman custom, this meant she was free, no longer under any man's control. She could have remarried, she was still young enough, still a princess, still valuable as a political tool. But Fatma refused every proposal. She told her father she would rather die than marry again, and this time, perhaps moved by guilt or perhaps simply unwilling to fight with his traumatized daughter, Suleiman agreed. Fatma spent the remaining years of her life in relative seclusion. She moved to a small palace on the Bosphorus, far from the main court, far from the memories that haunted Topkapi. She rarely saw her family, rarely participated in court functions. She was, by all accounts, a broken woman, unable to form close relationships, unable to trust anyone, unable to escape the nightmares that plagued her sleep. Several people who knew her during this period left descriptions of her appearance and behavior. She dressed simply, almost like a servant rather than a princess. She wore no jewelry, no cosmetics. Her face, once considered beautiful, had hardened into a mask of permanent sadness. She spoke little, and when she did, her words were often bitter, cynical observations about the nature of power and the fate of women. She developed a particular hatred for her father, blaming him for her suffering even more than she blamed her dead husband. "At least the pig who raped me acted according to his nature," she once told a servant. "But my father, he sold me to that pig, knowing what would happen. That is the greater crime." Fatma Sultan died in 1580 at the age of 31. The official cause of death was recorded as illness, but palace servants whispered a different story. They said she had finally succeeded in taking her own life, drinking poison mixed into her evening tea. They said she left no final words, no message for her family, no explanation. They said her face, in death, finally looked peaceful, free from the pain that had defined her adult life. Whether suicide or natural death, the result was the same. Fatma Sultan was finally free from the marriage that had destroyed her. Her death was noted in the official court records with a single line: "Fatma Sultan, daughter of Sultan Suleiman, passed into the mercy of God." There was no mention of the violence she endured, no acknowledgement of the suffering that had defined her short life, no recognition that she was a victim of a system that treated women as objects to be traded and used. But Fatma's story didn't end with her death. It lingered in the collective memory of the harem, a cautionary tale whispered between mothers and daughters. "Remember what happened to Fatma Sultan," they would say. "Remember what can happen when you are given to an old man. Remember that your suffering doesn't matter to those in power." The story was passed down through generations, changing in the retelling, but always maintaining its core truth. Even princesses could be victims. Even in palaces there was horror. Even in the most powerful empire on earth, a 13-year-old girl could be legally raped for 6 years, and no one would do anything to stop it. Modern historians studying Ottoman court records have found scattered references to Fatma's marriage and its aftermath. They've discovered the letter she wrote, but never sent. They've found testimony from servants describing her condition. They've uncovered medical records showing repeated treatment for injuries consistent with sexual violence. They've pieced together a picture of systematic abuse that would meet any modern definition of torture. Yet for centuries, Fatma's story was hidden, obscured by the official narrative of the glorious Ottoman court and the magnificent Sultan Suleiman. To acknowledge what happened to her would be to acknowledge that the system itself was diseased, that the very structures of power that made the Ottoman Empire great were built on the broken bodies and spirits of women like Fatma. Today, when we visit Topkapi Palace and walk through its beautiful courtyards, when we admire the intricate tile work and the stunning views of the Bosphorus, when we read about Suleiman the Magnificent and his golden age, we rarely think about Fatma Sultan. There's no plaque marking her suffering, no memorial acknowledging her pain. She exists only as a footnote in historical records, a name in a family tree, a minor character in the story of great men. But her story matters. It matters because it reveals the intimate violence that lurked behind imperial splendor. It matters because it shows how even the most privileged women were not safe from abuse when that abuse was sanctioned by law and custom. It matters because somewhere in the world today, there are still 13-year-old girls being married to old men, still children being told that their feelings don't matter, that their duty to family and tradition outweighs their right to safety and autonomy. Fatma Sultan's wedding night was not an isolated incident of a cruel husband and an unlucky bride. It was the predictable result of a system that treated women as property, that allowed old men to purchase access to children's bodies, that valued political alliances over human suffering. Semiramis Ali Pasha was not an anomaly. He was acting exactly as Ottoman society allowed and even encouraged men of his position to act. And Suleiman the Magnificent was not a villain in this story, at least not by the standards of his time. He was simply following the customs of his empire, rewarding loyal service, arranging advantageous marriages for his children. That his daughter was destroyed in the process was unfortunate, but from his perspective, necessary. This is perhaps the most disturbing aspect of Fatma's story. There were no villains here, not really. Just a system that allowed horror to unfold while everyone involved convinced themselves they were doing the right thing. Samiz Ali Pasha likely believed he was honoring his young wife by showing his desire for her. Hurrem Sultan probably thought she was helping her daughter by teaching her to weaponize her sexuality. Suleiman almost certainly felt he was being a good father by arranging such an advantageous marriage. And yet, despite everyone's conviction that they were acting properly, a child was systematically destroyed. This is the true horror of Fatma Sultan's story. Not that terrible things happened, but that terrible things happened while everyone involved followed the rules, maintained the customs, upheld the traditions. Her suffering was not a breaking of the system. It was the system working exactly as designed. As the sun sets over Istanbul today, casting golden light across the domes and minarets that still define the city skyline, somewhere in Topkapi Palace there's a small chamber that was once Fatma Sultan's room. Tourists walk past it without knowing, without stopping, without imagining the girl who once sat there braiding her hair and dreading her wedding day. But if you stand very still and listen closely, perhaps you can hear the echo of her voice, young and desperate and doomed. "Father, please," she begs, "don't make me marry him. I'm too young. He's too old, please." And the answer comes back cold and final. "Your feelings are irrelevant. The matter is settled." If you found this story as haunting as I did, please take a moment to leave your thoughts in the comments. These forgotten histories need to be remembered, discussed, and learned from. Your engagement helps ensure that stories like Fatma Sultan's are never completely erased from history.